Hi, my name's Michael. This is the first video in a 6-part course on how to master basic Plotly charts and formatting in R. In this course, we're going to start with the fundamentals of Plotly, so using the Plotly, layout, and add trace functions. Moving on to formatting, scatter and bubble plots, line charts, bar charts, and finishing with statistical charts. So in today's video, we'll go through Plotly fundamentals and we'll understand how each Plotly function is structured and then create our first graph. So by the end of this course, you should be able to construct the most common types of Plotly charts and customize them to your needs, including changing colors to your favorite color palette or maybe adhering to your company's brand guidelines. But for now, let's get started with the fundamentals. So any chart you create in Plotly in R is always going to start with the plot_ly function. And the arguments to that function are data, X, Y, type, mode, and color. There are more inputs to this, which we'll uncover in later videos, but for now, these are the main ones that you'll generally want to fill out in most cases. So the data argument is always going to contain your data that you want to plot. The X, Y, and color arguments are generally going to be 3 different variables from your data. So X, for example, could be your X-axis, Y could be your Y-axis. The type argument is always the type of chart you want to plot. So in this case, we're using scatter, but it could be bar or box plot, for example. And the mode defines how various data points are presented. So in this example, we're using the markers mode, which is just the dots for a scatter plot. Another common one would be lines, which we use for line charts. For the color argument, we're specifying a grouping variable or column from our data that will color our data by groups. You'll notice that in front of each of the variables provided to the X, Y, and color arguments, there is a tilde. That tilde just denotes that it is a column from our input data. If we didn't put that there, the function would be looking for a variable within our data set. So if you forget the tilde when inputting these variables, it will often come up with an error saying that the requested variable could not be found. The second function within the Plotly library that we're going to use a lot of is the layout function. We use the layout function for formatting, so things like specifying titles, positions of titles, the fonts, and positions of other elements such as the legend. There's some other more advanced uses of the layout function, but we'll go through those in later videos. One thing to note within the layout function is that we use lists to wrap all of our options and settings. This will become a little bit clearer when we go through some examples. The third most common function that we use is the add trace. Add trace allows us to add separate data series to a plot, which we may want to do if we want to add a different chart type to the plot. So say we want to overlay a bar chart over a line chart. And there may be instances where we use the add trace function for data within our current data set to provide more customization options. But again, we'll go through those in some later videos. Okay, so we're going to start with the Plotly library, and we're also going to use the dplyr library, which will make a bit more sense as we go through this tutorial. Now, for our data set, we're going to use the iris data set. Now, if you're not familiar with the iris data set, this is what it looks like. So it has 5 columns: the sepal length, sepal width, petal length, petal width, and species, and the data describes 150 observations of iris flowers. The dataset is included in R, so if you type in iris, it will actually just come up. We're just going to assign it though to this data variable. Okay, so let's create our first Plotly chart. So starting with the Plotly function, if I run that by itself, it will just come up with a plain X and Y Cartesian graph. So we need to put some data into it. So the first argument is always data. So we'll say data equals data. And again, if I run that, nothing will show as we haven't specified how we want this data to map to our plot. So I'll start by setting X equals to sepal length and Y equal to sepal width. I will set my type to scatter, my mode to markers. Now, if I run that, I get a pretty boring scatter plot with a bunch of blue dots on it. I can't tell what observation belongs to what. So I'm going to have to add the color argument, and I'll set that equal to species. So now we can see in our chart, each of the species has been color coded. So Setosa is green, Versicolor is orange, and Virginica is purple. So what would happen if I would have used a different mode? So at the moment, markers defines these dots that we see on our chart. But another common one that we might use is lines. So if I run that, you'll see what's happening is it's just connecting all the dots in sequential order for our data. And this isn't very helpful in this instance, but would be very helpful in a time series data, which we'll cover in a future video. So I'll change this back to markers. So now we've got a better looking chart, but our axis titles are looking pretty ordinary, and we're not entirely sure what the chart is plotting, because we have no chart title. So now we use the layout function to customize those. So what we're going to do is type in Control-Shift-M, which inserts this pipe. Now you can also type this in as the %, but Control-Shift-M does that a lot quicker. And this is from the dplyr package. So that's why I've used it up here, but we'll also be likely using it a bit later. So now we'll use our layout function. So we'll start with that. If I run that just as it is, you'll see nothing changes. But what we want to do is we'll start with the x-axis, and we're going to change the title of that to be sepal length centimeters in nice clear writing. So we're going to type in x-axis equals list. And this allows us to specify various arguments to the x-axis. In this instance, we want to update the title, and there's other things that we'll be able to update, which again we'll go through in a future video. And again, the title can take various arguments, so we're going to specify a list once more, and we're going to update the text to be sepal length bracket centimeters. If I run that, you'll see my x-axis title has been nicely updated. So I'll now go ahead and do that for my y-axis as well. So that one's looking a lot better. And then I want to update my chart title, which I will use the title argument. And if I run that, now I have a nice title at the top. Now, one additional thing we can do here is we can put a HTML bold tag, which is simply a less than, b greater than, and then we put at the other end the same thing, but this time it's got a slash, a forward slash in the middle, just to close off the bold. And we can see now we've updated that to be a nice bold heading. So this is looking a lot nicer than the chart we first started with. So this is all looking a lot better now, but you'll notice that the labels of our data are in lowercase characters. So we may want to update this. Now we can do it one of two ways. We can either update the underlying data, or we can actually update it within the Plotly chart itself. So let's do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to import a new library. This is just one of my favorite libraries. There are probably other ways to do this, but we're going to import the stringer library. And then we're going to go down to color down here. And between the tilde and the species, we're going to type in str_to_ sentence. And then we're going to run that. And you'll notice that these have all now been updated. So what is this doing exactly? If we take a look at the underlying data for a moment, you notice that the species are all in lowercase. Then if I wrap the species column in an str2 sentence, it's changing the starting character of every single species to be a capital. So the str2 sentence is basically taking any sentence. So I could type in str2 sentence and we'll say, I like coding in R. And if I run that in the console, we see I like coding in R with a capitalized I. So this is just a handy little trick to get your data looking the way that you want it for your plot. So we'll do one other example, which will be a bar chart. Okay, so for the bar chart, we're going to use a different data set. The reason being is generally for bar charts, we're going to be plotting things like the total count of different categories. But within the IRIS data, we had 50 observations of every species, so it's not going to be a particularly useful chart. So this time we're going to use the MTCars dataset. So if we take a look at what the MTCars dataset is, we can see here we've got some vehicles, and then we've got various statistics about those cars, including miles per gallon, total cylinders, the engine displacement, horsepower. I've got no idea what DRAD is. I'm assuming this is the weight, and then various other bits of information. So perhaps what we want to do is we want to count the total number of vehicles by the number of cylinders that the engine has. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new data set. We're going to call it data_cars, and it's going to be the MTCars, and I'll use my pipe, and I'm going to use a function within the dplyr library called count. I'm going to count the cylinders. And now if I run data_cars, you'll see here I've got the number of cylinders and the number of cars against each. So I've got 11 vehicles had 4 cylinders, 7 had 6 cylinders, and 14 had 8 cylinders. So that's exactly the type of data we want going into a Plotly function. So if I go plot_ly, data equals data_cars, x equals sil, y equals n, and don't forget the tilde. Now if I run that, it will automatically default to scatterplot, not particularly useful, but now I can say type equals bar, and then we will run that. And you see here, we get a nice bar chart, albeit with all blue columns. And like last time, I will update my axis titles, and now running that, I can see I've had this updated. All of my titles are now looking great. So the last thing we might want to do, and we'll have some better use cases for this in future videos, is we may want to overlay the chart with a line chart. So this isn't going to be particularly useful, but we'll add it in anyway. So we'll say y equals n, type equals scatter, mode equals markers plus lines. I'm seeing the chart now, we get a line chart overlaid on top of our bar chart. But you'll notice that the name of each of the chart types is just labeled trace 0 and trace 1. If If I had another one, it would be labeled trace2 and so on, which isn't particularly helpful. So in the next video, when we go through formatting, we'll discuss how to update these to be more helpful. So that's it for this video. Stay tuned for the next video in the series where we'll discuss how to format your charts in Plotly and make them look fantastic. If that video is out, it will appear on screen now and you can click there and watch that one. Don't forget, if you like this video, hit like and subscribe so you can find out when the next video in the series comes out and to help other people find my channel. If you have any suggestions for future videos or things you'd like explained further, just leave a comment down below. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.